All right, so I need to read chapters 3 through 7 to you all. And I'm going to get started because I have read this 2 times already today, so I should be an expert. So I'm going to hopefully not try to stumble through the reading today. So if I do, I apologize ahead of time. So, chapter 3, Monday, July 10th, 18:05 hours. As soon as the door of the Learjet opened, J.J. Lane's one-of-a-kind designer sunglasses fogged up with the oppressive blast of Guam humidity. Whoa, aloha, the 14-year-old chortled, handing the glasses over to his traveling companion, Dan Rappaport, for cleaning. Rappaport was a personal assistant to the world-famous movie star Jonathan Lane, JJ's father. Lately, though, it seemed like his new job I knew this was going to happen. Okay, I'm trying it again. Sorry. Lately, though, it seemed like his new job was as the keeper of JJ, who had turned into a real Hollywood brat. Aloha is what they say in Hawaii, Rappaport told his charge. I don't know what they say here. JJ shrugged. Doesn't matter. He hopped down to the tarmac. Where's my luggage? Rappaport permitted himself a secret smile as he handed over a small duffel bag. No, really, JJ insisted. There's half a dozen suitcases in the cargo hold. Rappaport shook his head. We left those when we stopped in Honolulu. On purpose? CNC gave us a list, JJ, and it didn't say anything about hang gliders. The movie star's son folded his arms across his chest. I'm not going. Suit yourself, said Rappaport, but you're not coming back with me. Have a nice month on Guam. And, oh yeah, I canceled your credit cards. JJ's reaction was equal parts shock and fury. I'm calling Dad. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed furiously. He listened for a moment, then threw the phone down to the pavement. My service has been terminated. You're lucky. It's midnight in LA right now. I doubt your father would be thrilled to hear from you. Rappaport took a deep breath. Listen, JJ, when you brought a case of champagne to the 8th grade dance, I worked hard to keep it out of the papers. When you sold the video of your father's pool party to Entertainment Tonight, I covered for you. When you did all that upscale shoplifting on Rodeo Drive, it was me who arranged for your father to make that donation to the Policemen's Brotherhood Fund. But when you took your father's Harley and drove it through the plate glass window of the art gallery, that's when it became time to get out of town for a while. Oh boy, he sounds like a brat. Out of town means Santa Barbara, maybe even Tahoe, not Mars. You're a flake, JJ, said Rappaport, but you're not an idiot. Even you can see that these little happenings of yours are getting worse and worse. You're going to kill somebody one of these days, maybe even yourself. The boy wrinkled his nose. You're enjoying this, aren't you? A wide grin split Rappaport's face. Oh, yeah. He noticed the CNC logo on the hat of the man striding across the tarmac toward them. This must be Mr. Radford now. He turned to the sailor and held out his hand. I'm Dan Rappaport from Jonathan Lane's office. Radford brushed right past him and took the duffel bag from JJ. Okay, Richie Rich, we sail in an hour. Totally ignored, Rappaport withdrew his hand. For a brief instant, he looked like he wanted to rescue JJ from his fate. Then he remembered the art gallery window and the Picasso with the tire treads on it. He got back in the Learjet and pulled the door shut behind him. Chapter 4, Tuesday, July 11th, 07:30 hours. Heave, bellowed Mr. Radford, untying the lines and pitching them onto the Phoenix. Luke, Charlotte, and Lisa stood on the edge of the deck, poles in hand, pushing against the dock to move the schooner away from its mooring. Put some back into it, howled the mate. Luke strained until he felt his spine was about to snap. Water opened up between the dock and the boat. Radford jumped on board. He cupped his hands to his mouth. Clear! In the cockpit, Captain Cascaden engaged the engine. The Phoenix began to pick her way delicately out of the harbor. Luke watched the multicolored sails of the other boats go by as the deck thrummed under his feet. Sure, he would have given his right arm to be almost anywhere else, but there was a certain majesty to gliding across the water. Definitely a feeling you couldn't get in Williston Juvenile Detention Facility. He could see that his fellow crew members felt it too, all except one. Captain, my father is a powerful man in Hollywood, said JJ smoothly. I know he'd make it worth your while if you put me on a plane back to the States. The captain's eyes never wavered from the course he was steering. This is the States, crewman. You know, the real States, L.A. Coast Guard cutter off the starboard bow. 300 yards, warned Radford from his perch on the ratlines. Your father, said the captain, paid good money for you to be on this ship. I saw the check, crewman. It's a misunderstanding, JJ said. He signed me up for the boat thing, just not this boat thing. I mean, no offense, but you've got 4 people sleeping in a closet, and the bathroom is a phone booth. I can't even honk. Will clamped himself onto a bulwark and held on until the ear-splitting blast of the air horn died away. His racing heart slowed. What was he doing here? How had his life come to this, on the wrong side of the globe, setting sail on a wooden cracker box? If I get out of this, he made a deal with the sky. I swear I'll never cheat on another math test. The Phoenix didn't put on the brakes and turn around. Instead, the schooner eased through the mouth of the harbor. So he sweetened the pot. I swear I'll floss from now on every night. Rough hands grabbed him by the collar. Off your butt, Archie. This is a working ship. Radford cupped his hands to his mouth. Ready on the mainsail, skipper. Haul, bellowed the captain. Will and Charla began yanking away at the halyard, hand over hand. With the creak of the rigging, the mainsail began to rise. Ahead of them, Luke and Ian were hauling up the foresail, their faces taut with concentration. Closer to the bow, JJ and Lisa worked on the small staysail. Didn't it figure? They gave Lisa the easy sail. It had been like that from the beginning. She was always the sweet little baby, while Will was the older one who should know better. People loved Lisa. The good looks in the family were all hers. He got stuck with freckles. She was a straight A student. He struggled. I should have been an only child, he grunted through the strain of his effort. Charla looked down at him like he was crazy. Lisa's fault, as usual. When the wind caught the half-open mainsail, its force pulled the halyard right out of Will's hand, delivering a painful rope burn. Ouch. Charla held on, but with the sail taut, the line was difficult to budge. Will clamped himself on again, and both leaned into it with all their might. Up went the sail, flapping full. You'll earn your dinner tonight, roared Radford. The mate had just joined Luke and Ian. Soon the foresail was up. Last came the jibs, 2 small sails extended from the head of the foremast to the bowsprit, the long, thin spar that reached forward from the bow. The crew fell back, exhausted. Will looked down at his hands, which were blistered and bleeding. You'd think they'd figure out a way to put up sails without taking off all your skin. He caught sight of his sister. She was smiling. Smiling! If this is over really fast, Will promised, I swear I'll get in shape. I'll jog every day. I'll lift weights. Don't get comfortable, bawled Radford. This is the main sheet. It's not a sheet off your bed. It's a line, and these pulleys are called blocks. Watch what happens when I ease up on the main sheet. Expertly, the mate undid the knot and gave the rope some slack. He turned to Luke. Hey, Archie. Luke turned. Yeah? A gust of wind took the sail and swung it out over their heads at right angles to the boat. Bang! The block swept around and smacked Luke, ouch, full in the face, knocking him off his feet. Radford laughed out loud. I was going to warn you, but never mind. When the foresail was aligned, Captain Cascade cut power and let the schooner run with the wind. The crisp ocean breeze blew away the stifling Guam humidity in an instant. Now you're sailing, rumbled the captain behind the wheel. There's no feeling quite like it. Lisa hopped up on the engine housing, threw her arms wide, and let her long hair whip in the wind. Feel that breeze. Where I come from, Charlotte told her, a wind like this would knock you right off the fire escape. Will burned. Lisa was making friends here, like she did everywhere. By the time this trip was over, she was going to be voted Miss Congeniality on this tub. This would be like a vacation for her while he suffered. It was so unfair. If it wasn't for Lisa, they wouldn't even be on this dumb trip. Sure, he got in her face a lot. She deserved it. Besides, when they were fighting, it was always Lisa who went ballistic. Involuntarily, his mind jumped to the incident that his parents had to call the last straw. The argument started out small. Two Halloween parties. Who would get dropped off first? Something like that. No big deal. He remembered Mom in the background screaming for them to calm down. And then the marble rolling pin from Lisa's chef costume was hurtling toward his face. He heard, rather felt, his nose break. Ouch. The blood poured like somebody had busted a hydrant. He couldn't even recall fighting back. He must have, though, because when he woke up in the hospital, Lisa was in the next bed with a concussion. Both of them were so beaten up that the cops had to file a special report to rule out child abuse. Take my word for it, the officer assured the Greenfield parents. If you don't do something about these two, they're going to kill each other. And, just their luck, the admitting nurse happened to have a third cousin whose juvenile delinquent son had been sent on a boat trip called Charting a New Course. Tears stung Will's eyes as Guam became smaller and smaller. Oh, great. Now he was going to be Ship's crybaby, too. He ran for the companionway to the main cabin, determined that nobody would see him. There he came face to face with Luke, who was holding a cold towel to his rapidly swelling eye. You're my witness, Luke seethed. You saw that lousy rat face. He did it on purpose. Will smiled, his first of the day. Rat face, Radford. Why didn't I think of that? That's funny. No, it isn't, Luke raged. It's the least funny thing on a very unfunny trip. With a sigh, Will followed him back on deck. It was some small comfort that he wasn't the only one who was miserable. Lisa was hanging around the captain, schmoozing him while he explained how the boat's motor worked. Will snorted in disgust. One science fair project on the internal combustion engine, and Lisa thought she was Jeff Gordon's whole pit crew. He looked back at the sky. If I get out of this? But he wasn't getting out of anything. Guam was barely a speck in the horizon. The best he could hope for was a sign. Something, anything, that hinted all this might turn out okay. An odd look came over Lisa's face as she stood with the captain halfway down the engine hatch. With a strangled sound, she scrambled to the side, draped herself over the lifeline, and was thoroughly, violently sick. So Lisa ended up getting sick. Her brother probably really appreciated that. Chapter 5, Wednesday, July 12th, 1100 hours. Lisa hit the water first, a cannonball that sent a splash all the way back to Captain Cascadin in the cockpit. It's warm, she shrieked, amazed. Will was next, climbing carefully down the boat's swim ladder. He submerged and bobbed like a cork. It is warm. It's great. Luke jumped in and paddled around happily. It felt good to be cool and clean. Hey, Ian, called Will, come get your feet wet. The younger boy averted his eyes. I don't think so. Come on, you'll love it, Lisa promised. But Ian had disappeared down the companionway to the sleeping quarters. Luke shook his head. Poor kid, he forgot to download his personality before they made him ship his computer home. I wonder why he got sent here, mused Lisa. He probably wouldn't mind his own business, just like you, snickered Will. Shut up. Charlotte stood poised on the gunwale. She was perched only on the tips of her toes, but she didn't move a muscle, even with the gentle rocking of the boat. Gracefully, she sailed off the side in a perfect jackknife, hitting the water with barely a splash. The other swimmers and even Captain Cascadin burst into cheers and applause. Charlotte broke the surface, took a few smooth, powerful strokes, then flipped effortlessly to float on her back. She had always been comfortable in the water, but it was more than that. Swimming somehow seemed to relieve her pressures and tensions, and she had quite a few. You're a fish, cried Will. She shrugged modestly. I'm on the swim team at school. And the diving team? Asked Luke. She nodded shyly. But you were talking about track and field before, put in Lisa. Only the 100 meters and the hurdle, said Charlotte, embarrassed by the attention. I like gymnastics better anyway. She felt a twinge of uneasiness. Why was she talking so much? These people didn't need to know her private business. Man, what are you doing here? Exclaimed Luke. You're the perfect kid. What, your parents signed you up because you're too good? Maybe you can take rotten lessons from Ratface. Charlotte's smile disappeared. I'm not so good. In 2 textbook strokes, she was at the ladder and clambering back on board. Luke was mystified. What'd I say? Don't worry, Luke, said Will. You can accuse me of being good. I can take it. Lisa splashed him in the face. There are a lot of words that describe you. Good isn't one of them. Charlotte glared down at them from the gunwale. Rich kid always acted like they knew everything. What did they have to worry about besides deciding which mall to shop at? The other athletes she knew, the ones whose dads weren't working 3 jobs, could enjoy their sports. It wasn't their ticket. It's your ticket out, Charla. It's your ticket up. Your ticket to college. Your ticket to a better life. She heard those words 20 times a day from her father. Pick one sport. You're spreading yourself too thin. It's your ticket to the Olympic team. Go, go, go. I'm 12, Dad, and isn't this supposed to be fun? I don't want a ticket. If I even hear the word again, I'm going to scream. Maybe if she had the guts to say that, she might have avoided that fateful morning when she couldn't get out of bed because her arms and legs wouldn't move. Charla Swan, who could twist herself in a graceful pretzel on the uneven bars, could barely walk into the emergency room. And yet, there was nothing physically wrong with her. Burnout. Classic burnout, the doctor had said. And that had led to a ticket even her father hadn't anticipated, the one to Guam that included a berth on the Phoenix with a bunch of spoiled rich kids. Well, okay, they weren't really rich, just richer than her, which wasn't hard to be. Except for that hotshot from California, he was loaded. He had a pair of sunglasses that could probably sell for more than her dad's car. Come to think of it, where was JJ? And then a voice yelled, "Aloha!" A voice from above. There was JJ, high up on the mainsail rigging. Captain Cascaden saw him too. "Crewman, get down from there this instant!" JJ waved. "Sorry, Captain, can't hear you." "Mr. Radford," roared the captain, "I need you on deck." The mate was asleep in his berth after taking last night's watch, but the captain's strident voice brought him up the companionway in a matter of seconds. He took in the scene in an instant. "Don't even think about it," he barked furiously. Too late. With a cry of "Geronimo!" JJ grabbed onto a loose rope and swung himself off the mainmast, clear past the deck and out over the open sea. There he let go and dropped like a stone in the water. It seemed like a long time, a breathless time, before JJ surfaced again, howling in triumph. The celebration was short-lived. Cursing with rage, Mr. Radford took a running leap off the side of the boat and hit the water, swimming. His form was crude and untrained, but Charlotte had never seen anybody move that fast in water. He scooped JJ up, Red Cross style, towed him back to the swim ladder, and hauled him, still protesting, on board. "You miserable little muckworm, do you know what mutiny is?" JJ blinked innocently. "Wasn't that a classic movie from way back when you were, still old?" He is a brat. Now Radford was screaming, "Listen, Richie Rich, when we left Guam, we left the United States. In international waters, a captain is God, and I'm assistant God. When we say come down, down is where you come." He turned his fury on the 3 still in the water. "Okay, swimming's over. You've got your friend Richie Rich to thank for that." Charlotte watched in sympathy as Luke, Will, and Lisa scrambled nervously up the swim ladder. Captain Cascaden was a nice man, she reflected, but he didn't seem to notice that his mate was more than just a gruff sailor. Mr. Radford didn't like people, especially kids, and his bullying seemed to increase with their distance from the land. She swallowed hard. They were going a lot further than this. Chapter 6. Thursday, July 13th, 22:35 hours. Luke had plenty of complaints about shipboard life, but he couldn't say there was nothing to do. In fact, he'd never been so busy. The sails alone were a full-time career. They constantly needed raising, lowering, trimming, letting in, letting out. Somehow, the state they were in was never the right one. When Luke and the others weren't fussing with the boat, they were fussing with the sea around it. Science stuff mostly. Whale watching, plankton and tows, identifying schools of fish. They did math with wave heights and water temperature and indexed it to their location, which they got from the handheld global positioning satellite system. It was all supposed to go in their logbooks, but Luke could never think of anything to write. He was sitting on deck trying to describe a fish he had seen 10 hours ago, when a shadow fell across the flashlit page. Captain Cascaden was unfolding his 6'5" frame out of the companionway. Evening, crewman. He noticed the logbook in Luke's hand. Ah, keeping a log is one of the great pleasures of life at sea. As years go by, you'll read this over many times. Right. Like he wanted to relive this lousy trip any more than he wanted to remember the arrest and trial leading up to it. But he bit his tongue and said nothing. Captain Cascaden could be annoying with his long, boring speeches about the joys of the sea, but he was a nice guy at heart. You definitely had to respect him. Not like Ratface. Here's something that would make a fascinating entry, the captain rambled on, pointing to the sky. Notice the bright halo around the moon. According to legend, that tells of a coming storm. Count the stars inside the ring. 1, 2. That means the storm is 2 days away. Really? Luke was amazed. And that works? The captain chuckled. It's just an old salt's tale, but 100 years ago it was considered science. He made a great show of lighting a corncob pipe. Today we get constant weather updates by fax. So there's no storm, said Luke. We're fine, the captain assured him. Rougher seas tomorrow, though. No swimming. Luke said goodnight and slipped down the companionway to the boys' cabin. Bad news, Evel Knievel, he said to JJ. No swimming tomorrow. You'll have to find another way to kill yourself. Bug off, yawned the actor's son. He rolled over in his bunk and banged on the bulkhead. Hey, ladies, which one of you wants to come over and give me a nice foot massage? There was a scrambling sound on deck above them, followed by the shuffling of shoes on the companionway. The furious face of Mr. Radford soon appeared. Hey, Richie Rich, the girls' cabin is on the starboard side. Behind this bulkhead is where I sleep. And if I get one more invitation like that, you're going over the side with an anchor in your pants. Way to go, Luke muttered in a low voice as the mate stormed away. Ratface isn't the friendliest guy in the world as it is. Thanks for putting him in an even worse mood. We really need the grief. It's not smart, added Will in a softer tone. When he's mad at you, he's mad at all of us. Thanks for the life lessons, said JJ sarcastically. Don't you know who I am? My father is Jonathan Lane. And I'm Bugs Bunny's kid, snorted Luke. Notice a family resemblance? I am, JJ insisted. He pulled out his sunglasses out of his shirt pocket. Paul Smith, the fashion designer, gave these to my dad in England last year. They're custom made. There's not another pair exactly like them in the world. Luke examined the sleek silver shades. On one earpiece was engraved, Jonathan Lane, the toast of England. Will was impressed. Your dad's an amazing actor. It all came together in Luke's mind. Rich father, fancy lawyers, and if Luke had had that, this is just great, he exclaimed. You're allowed to be a maniac because you know your big shot daddy has the power to get you out of anything. Furious, JJ leaped out of his bunk and leaned in Luke's face. Well, I'm stuck here with you, so obviously there are a few things that he can't get me out of, right? They stood seething toe to toe. Hey, come on, began Will. But a brawl seemed unavoidable. And then a muffled sob broke through the tension, and all three turned to follow the sound. Ian Sikorsky rocked back and forth on his bunk, his knee pulled up to his chest. He was crying as if he had just met the end of the world. Hey, said Luke in a voice that was none too steady. Don't do that. Nothing's worth it. Yeah, echoed JJ, speaking as much to Luke as to Ian. Ian nodded and sniffled, struggling to get himself under control. It was Will who couldn't leave well enough alone. Ian, what did a nice kid like you do to get yourself a seat on this windjammer cruise? I watched TV, quavered the young boy, and the tears started up again. This time there was no stopping them until sleep claimed him. All right, last chapter of the day, chapter 7. Friday, July 14th, 0610 hours. Slam! 4 orange life jackets came sailing down to the deck of the crew quarters. Will came awake with a start. He sat up and was nearly tossed from his berth by the rolling of the cabin. Personal flotation devices, barked Mr. Radford. Get dressed and get in them. Will's heart was in his throat. Is the boat sinking? They're called waves, snarled the mate. Maybe you've heard of them. Now hurry up. The 4 boys got themselves ready in a tangle of elbows and knees. On deck, they found Lisa on her hands and knees at the gunwale, throwing up over the side. It was the one sight that could have brought a smile to Will's gray face. Mom and Dad always tell us, find what you do best and you do your best with it. You're turning into a real whiz at barfing, Liz. Lisa was too weak to fire off a retort. Good morning, bellowed the captain from the cockpit. I think today might test your sea legs a little. We're seeing 8-foot waves with swells in the 10-foot range, and the wind's going to pick up later in the day, so let's be extra careful on deck. Now, I want all of you to go and eat a hearty breakfast. You'll need your strength. That's all. The 6 crew members crept gingerly aft and climbed down the companionway to the tiny galley, which was just off the main cabin. There, the powerful odor of sizzling butter practically knocked them over. Scrambled eggs, crowed Mr. Radford. Nice and greasy. They'll slide all the way down. In a flash, Lisa was back up on deck, gulping for air. Luke opened the latch and folded the table down from the bulkhead. The crew gathered around it. That rat face is some piece of work, he muttered. 3 days we've had a dry toast, but now that we've hit heavy seas, he decides to get creative in the kitchen. It was a rough day on the inexperienced crew. The wind was whipping around the rigging, and the deck pitched to and fro. They struggled through the fine, chilling spray off the whitecaps, their shoes slipping on the slick deck. By 1100 hours, Will was beside his sister on the rail, giving up his scrambled eggs to the Pacific. It's days like this, yelled Mr. Radford, that made me become a sailor. The Phoenix tacked, sailing close-hauled at an angle, first to port, then to starboard. It's called beating to windward, the captain explained. We can get where we're going in a zigzag without ever having to sail into the wind. The constant changes in directions meant a lot of work on the sails. Their hands were raw and bleeding by the time Mr. Radford called lunch. The meal was another rough weather masterpiece, liver and onions with canned succotash. Yuck. The mate took great delight in watching the faces turn green. Ian and JJ barely touched their food, but Luke refused to give Radford the satisfaction of hearing him say uncle. He sat across the table from the cook, glaring into his eyes and matching his mouthful for mouthful. Ready for seconds? Challenged the mate. Bring it on, replied Luke, tight-lipped. The wind got stronger. Captain Cascadin ordered the sails trimmed and took down the 2 jibs on the bowsprit. By this time, the swells were reaching 12 feet. It's like a roller coaster, moaned Will, hugging the main sheet as if he were trying to enmesh himself in the ropes and pulleys. If I get through this day, he vowed, I swear I'll give up smoking if I ever start. I love the sea, roared Mr. Radford, shaking off a face full of spray like a sheepdog after a bath. We'll make sailors of you lot yet. I'm a landlubber, JJ groaned defensively, and the more time I spend on this boat, the more I love the land. Luke had never seen the mate this happy. Radford was so nasty that it took everybody's combined misery to put him in a good mood. Hey, Archie, he called to Luke. You don't look so hot. You'll feel a lot better if you let that seasickness out. Luke grimaced. His stomach was doing serious backflips. That would put the crowning touch on Ratface's day. He set his jaw. It was never going to happen. Grim with determination, he staggered forward, stumbled down to the companionway, and squeezed himself into the tiny head. He couldn't even get down on his knees. There wasn't enough room. He just bent over the bowl and surrendered to his overwhelming nausea. Then he flushed away all traces, rinsed his mouth, and washed his face. Back on deck, the captain was addressing the assembled crew. There's no break from these rough seas yet. We're going to have to strike the sails and heave to under power. I heaved already, said JJ feelingly. Shut up, Richie Rich, snapped Radford. Heave to means to turning into the wind. If you listen, you might hear what you don't hear because you're not listening. Captain, said Will in a timid voice, how scared should we be? I mean, are we in trouble here? The captain threw back his head and laughed heartily. Steady on, my boy. This is an ordinary day at the office for the Phoenix. She's been in seas twice this size and come through with flying colors. She's a fine ship, seaworthy in every way. So down came the sails. No one felt like eating, but the captain ordered toast and ginger ale for all hands. The swells were reaching 15 feet. Standing near the bow, it looked as if the sea were opening up to swallow the Phoenix. The troughs between waves were so low that for a second there was dead calm down there. No wind, no spray. It was the eeriest part. Luke actually found himself yearning for the blustery chaos atop the crest. Ian was the first to decide to ride out the rough seas strapped in his bunk. He disappeared down the companionway. A moment later, there was a blood-curdling scream. "We're sinking! We're sinking!" Mr. Radford ran over to the companionway. "Take it easy, Archie. We're not sinking." He looked down and saw the boy standing up to his ankles in water. "Holy Skipper, we've got water in the crew cabin." Captain Cascaden turned on the bilge pump and grabbed the person closest to him. "Crewman, take the wheel." Will stared at him in shock and horror. But I don't know how to drive." "We're in the open Pacific," the captain assured him. "You're not going to hit anything. Just hold her steady. I'll be right back." Will stood there with an iron grip on the wheel. The captain hurried below. "A leak?" he asked his mate. "Negative." Lisa jumped down the companionway to the girls' quarters. "No water in here, Captain," she called. Captain Cascaden opened the door to the head. 8 inches of water poured out into the cabin. The toilet bowl was full and overflowing. Seawater surged out of the flusher pump with each wave that hit the boat. The captain reached down and twisted the lever on the pump. "False alarm, Mr. Radford. Somebody forgot to close the valve." "I'll kill him," threatened the mate. "You'll do no such thing," chuckled the captain. "In fact, I don't even want to know who it was. Get a pump and bail out this cabin." A bell went off in Luke's mind. He pictured himself sick as a dog, but determined that Ratface would never find out about his Technicolor yawn. He'd put so much energy into cleaning up after the evidence that he had forgotten to shut the valve. Guiltily, he volunteered for the worst job in the pumping operation. His pants rolled up to his knees. He stood in the head, holding the sucking tube and trying not to fall in the toilet as the deck tossed under his feet. Mr. Radford ranted through the whole business. "How many times do I have to tell you to close that valve? Does anybody have half a brain on this ship?" It was torture, Luke thought, but it was better than having to confess that this was all his fault. All right, that is the end of chapter 7. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. Get outside. It's nice. I am now officially done reading for the day. It's the 3rd time I've read it. So I will see you guys later, hopefully tomorrow during office hours or during community time. Bye. Hope you have a good one.